This was your home.
Look how they massacred my boy.
DmC, Devil May Cry, which from here on out I'll refer to as Devil May Cry Reboot or simply just The Reboot, came out in 2013 for PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. It got a definitive edition in 2015 for PS4 and Xbox One. There technically is no definitive edition for PC, but some of the add-ons included in the definitive edition can be purchased separately, that being Vergil's DLC, Bloody Palace mode, and some costumes. Some of the extras that weren't carried over to PC, unfortunately, were some changes to the control scheme, which I will bitch about soon, be warned, not being able to use Vergil during Bloody Palace, and some extra difficulty modes. If me calling this a reboot hadn't already tipped you off, the game takes place completely separate from the first four. And I mean separate. Every character that represents their main timeline counterpart pretty much only does so in name and weapon choice alone. In this universe, you've got your humans and then demons who occupy their own realm. The game has angels too, but they barely do anything with the angel side of the plotline, and angelic enemies in previous games were still considered demons, they just had light-based powers, so I'm not really sure what purpose angels served in this game. Unlike the main series, the demon realm is sort of layered on top of the human one. They reside in a dimension called Limbo, which is basically like a distorted, fucked up version of real life. But humans and demons have to stay in their respective realms. Dante, the main character, is half demon, so he can go in and out of both realms. Kat, a supporting character you meet literal minutes after starting the game, is human, but because she's good with magic, she can see the Limbo stuff, though she can't tangibly interact with it. Just like in DmC 1, Mundus is in this universe, and this version of him is also the ruler of the underworld, just like in the original. But instead of being an elegant-looking bearded statue, he's this chubby businessman type figure. Kind of like Arius from Devil May Cry 2 if he lost his hair and gained like 30 pounds. There's this theme the game runs with where demons are kind of integrated into everyone's everyday lives, and the higher ranking ones control the mortal realm down to the corporate and in some cases political level. This Mundus still has that 3-dotted insignia that the original had though, so I'm kind of glad they kept that. So the game opens with Dante being abruptly interrupted by some commotion outside. He steps out, and this is where he meets Kat, who was sent out by this universe's Vergil to try and find him, because Mundus is trying to track Dante down and eliminate him. Vergil runs a resistance called the Order. Wait a minute. What is that? What is that? They put a fedora on Vergil! Anyway, the Order's been planning to kill Mundus in order to free humanity from his reign. Dante has to gradually get his memories back regarding his childhood and the time he spent with Vergil. Basically, the way this origin story worked was that Sparta, who is Mundus's brother in this version, by the way, still fell in love with their mother, Eva. But this version of Eva is actually an angel, which means Dante and Vergil aren't human at all. They're half angel, half demon. Nephilim, as they're referred to in this game. Mundus, livid over the fact that Sparta went and knocked up an angel, tracks them down. He manages to kill Eva and imprison Sparta for eternity. Shortly before he got captured, Sparta erased Dante and Vergil's memories and hid them amongst humanity. Vergil managed to get his memories back first and has been looking for Dante ever since. It is worth noting, Mundus did not know that Sparta had twins. He was only aware of Dante, which Vergil does use to his advantage as he leads the Order in their endeavors. So once Dante gets back up to speed on what's going on, Vergil goes into more detail about how they're going to accomplish their goal. Basically, there's two major things they need to do to weaken Mundus's influence on the world. The first would be Virility, a popular energy drink advertised to both taste good and improve weight loss. But in reality, the ingredients are being milked from a demon called Succubus.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you!
And the drinks make the general public more oblivious to what's going on behind the scenes, cause demon magic, I guess. Then there's the Raptor News Network, a propaganda machine run by a guy called Bob Barbas, that frequently slanders Dante and the other members of the Order. His lair is a news building, but in Limbo it doubles as a prison to hold demons who get on Mundus's bad side. Those are your two main objectives for a good bit of the game, so let's get into the gameplay. Dante has his usual rebellion along with Ebony and Ivory as guns, same as all the other games. One thing I just couldn't get used to though, and I know Definitive Edition fixed it, but it still exists on PC, to be fair, there is no lock-on in this game. The dodge button is the right bumper, and then the B, or circle button, depending on what you got, is specifically for launching enemies, or aerial slams if you're already in the air yourself, and then lock-on just straight up doesn't exist. Like, it doesn't make the game unplayable by any means, but man, it is pretty annoying. Specifically during group fights when you have a whole bunch of targets. As a matter of fact, I can count on my fingers the amount of times I actually used guns in this game. It wasn't much, and part of that was because it's pretty counterproductive to use without lock-on. Unless you have one enemy left to kill, you're kind of taking a gamble with regards to who Dante's gonna aim at. The upgrade system is similar to Devil May Cry 4, but it's actually a lot more bearable in this game. Instead of Proud Souls being their own currency and everything becoming more expensive the more stuff you buy, you just earn little upgrade tokens as you progress through the game. And your upgrade list for each weapon is more of a checklist instead of a shop, which I'm fine with because it means that every upgrade is effectively the same price. So it becomes less so what you can afford and more so what do you want to learn first. The way they did the devil arm weapons in the game is also weird. So Dante has an angel mode and a demon mode in this game, and every extra weapon you earn is one of these two things. You get a scythe and a pair of shurikens, which are the two angel weapons, and then an axe and a pair of boxing gloves for the two demon weapons. Dante also has a grappling hook similar to Nero's Devilbringer from 4. Using the grappling hook in demon mode pulls enemies towards you, and then using it in angel mode pulls you towards enemies. The grappling feature is also used for swinging around and moving platforms for you to jump on, and frankly this is probably the most entertaining that platforming has been in the series so far. Except that one mission near the end of the game with the Hellfire. Fuck that level. They could have easily just let the fire be part of the scenery or something, but no, you had to make it an environmental hazard that doesn't really test your skill at all and pretty much only exists to artificially prolong the level and lower your letter grade at the end. It almost made me want to go back to Devil May Cry 2 again. Almost. So while the angel demon mode, which is utilized by holding the left or right triggers while you're attacking, is an interesting concept, one thing they did that I really just can't get behind are the color-coded enemies. Enemies where you're required to either use the corresponding angel or demon weapons to be able to damage them. Granted, every Devil May Cry game has had its customary weak to guns type of enemy. Devil May Cry 1 had the scissor enemies, Devil May Cry 2 pretty much every enemy, the Soul Eaters in Devil May Cry 3, and the Mephistos and Fausts in 4. The Blitz was also kinda like this as well, but at least he didn't get much screen time. With the reboot, as soon as you unlock the Angel Demon mode switching, it just feels almost like the whole damn game tries to lock you into playing a certain way. In the older games, you could do whatever you wanted to enemies. Even if you picked an inefficient way to kill them, you still did something so long as you looked cool while doing it. In this game, as far as color-coded enemies go, you can't even combo them. If you use the wrong weapon, it'll just bounce off. You're required to kill them the way the game asks you to, which most older Devil May Cry games didn't push on you. Yeah, you'd have things like your brutish, beefy enemy that staggers a lot from the gauntlet punches, or the scrawny foot soldiers that take the most damage from crowd control combos with the sword, but you could still switch things up and find success if you were good with the weapon. The color coding, again, not the worst thing in the world, but it does kind of cramp your style, quite literally. I do have to say, one of the best things about the game, though, is the level design. I've got to hand it to them. Areas do look very cool, especially for the aesthetic they were going with. And the different pieces of buildings and rubble in Limbo distorting to make new structures and stuff, it is very pleasing to look at. The saturation can be a bit harsh at times, but I mean, I definitely like the concept. The writing on the wall that sometimes shows up is also a nice touch, and I think one of the most brilliant uses of these visuals is during, I think, Mission 16, where Kat is going over the plan with Dante and Vergil on how to infiltrate Mundus's corporate building. It shows her drawing the things out on like a chalkboard. Then when you're going through the building, she's narrating the plan as you're completing objectives, and then sometimes the environment will change to the chalkboard art style and arrows will point you to where you need to go next to show how she wrote the whole thing out and how it's coming to life. And I do think that was a very, again, a brilliant use of the visuals. Where was I? Oh, right. So with Dante's help, it doesn't take long for the Virility Plant and Raptor News Network to go under. Shortly after Dante defeats Bob Barbas, Mundus discovers the Order's hideout and sends a SWAT team over there to capture everyone. At least that's the non-Limbo version. Within Limbo, the place was crawling with demons that Dante had to clear out. The SWAT team manages to capture Kat, and Vergil suggests just forgetting about her because it'd be too much trouble to try and waste resources getting her back, but Dante insists that they do so. He explains that Mundus's bitch, Lilith, I'm not even trying to be funny, she actually calls herself that.
The world is at last your bitch, as am I.
is currently pregnant with Mundus's child. If they can kidnap her, they can use that as leverage to get Kat back. So that's what Dante does. Lilith runs a nightclub nearby. Dante beats the shit out of both her and her not-so-unborn baby and captures her. Dante and Vergil inform Mundus that they have Lilith and they offer to trade her for Kat. Mundus agrees and the two parties meet each other, guns out and everything. However, as Kat and Lilith are walking towards each other to complete the exchange, Vergil just says, "Nah, fuck this, I'm aborting this little shit," and he shoots Lilith in the stomach, and then again in the head. You gotta wonder though, was she crying because her kid just died, or was it out of the fear at the possibility of surviving but then being on the receiving end of Mundus's fury? Maybe a little bit of both. We shall never know. Of course, all hell breaks loose, no pun intended. Despite all the commotion, Dante manages to scoop up Kat, and surprisingly, they escape. This is where the trio starts formulating their plan to take out Mundus for good, and things are actually pretty straightforward from there. They work their way through the corporate building. Dante and Vergil work together to defeat Mundus. Well, Dante did like 90% of the fighting. Vergil helped the most when it came to hacking the building's defenses. Dante kills Mundus, and the stage is set for everyone to live happily ever after.
Free from the demons. The path is clear for us to rule.
What?
Dante, obviously bewildered, kind of looks at Vergil and he's like, "Hey, what the hell? This isn't what we were supposed to be working for." And then Vergil starts talking down about humans, saying, "Well, someone's got to rule them. Look how fragile they are. They're like children." And while I don't think he's entirely wrong on some of those points, especially considering this is a universe where angels and demons coexist with humans and are obviously far stronger, it is a bit insensitive and it does spit directly in the face of all the humans that helped both of them get that far to begin with, like Kat, which Dante points out. Vergil then says, "Hey, listen, this is my club now. If you don't like it, you can leave. The door's open." And the two get ready to fight. So yeah, Vergil was evil all along. Ooh, who could have ever seen that coming, right? Some say Vergil turning bad was kind of out of left field, but I think they gave you enough hints, even if you had no knowledge of the older games. He is a bit too eager to abandon Kat during their raid on the Order's HQ. Although I'd say the biggest hit was probably killing Lilith and the way he killed her too, which gives away the fact that he's dishonest and quite brutal. I mean, I guess you could argue that he was also just being preemptive because, let's be real here, I guess Mundus could have done the same thing, but I'll concede to the fact that maybe they waited too late into the game for him to turn on them, but I'd still say this works in my opinion. Anyway, Dante fights Vergil, which is probably the most familiar segment of the entire game. This Vergil is still pretty weak though. If it was Nilo Angelo or Devil May Cry 3 Vergil, I would have gotten my ass beat to sleep. But because it's fedora tipping reboot Vergil, I managed to clean him up with minimal effort. Just make sure that you save up your devil trigger for the end, because when Vergil's almost dead, he puts up a shield and has a doppelganger protect him while he regens HP. And to my knowledge, you can't bust through it unless you devil trigger it. Man, really was a little bitch right up until the end, huh? Dante is about to kill Vergil, but then Kat begs him not to. Vergil heads out, and yeah, that's the end of it. And before you ask, I didn't bother buying or playing his DLC. You could say I was lacking the motivation.
You trash.
The ending did feel really abrupt. They don't comment on the fact that demons now share the same space as humans and how they're going to cope with that. They don't show any of Dante or Kat working out their own solution to this new problem either. As a matter of fact, that could have been a perfect transition into this universe's Dante opening up his own demon hunting business the same way the regular Dante did, but I guess they didn't. Also, neither Dante nor Vergil make any indication of going back to save Sparta. Remember, Mundus only killed Eva, but Sparta was just imprisoned, so he's still alive, and even better, Mundus is dead now, so it'd probably hardly take any effort to go rescue him. Like, when were these two gonna come back with the milk? We hear about absent fathers all the time, but what about absent sons? Granted, you could argue that Vergil just didn't care because he was scheming to take over the whole world anyway, but what about Dante? I feel like at the very least he should have considered it. I feel like maybe the writers themselves forgot about Sparta, or maybe more than likely they wanted to leave room for a possible sequel, but obviously the next Devil May Cry that they made didn't revisit this universe, so yeah. Honestly, the whole thing kind of felt like one of those weird Netflix adaptations that had a couple of things in common with the source material, and then everything else was just this drastic like deviation. Overall, I guess in conclusion, despite all of my bitching, didn't I say that during the Devil May Cry 4 review too? But despite everything, I don't think this is an awful game. At the very least, it's fun to play, which already puts it above DmC 2 just for that alone. I guess it's just really jarring, especially if you're talking in a narrative sense. It just seems out of touch, which is probably right on the money since Devil May Cry 4, not doing as insanely well as 3, it still did well, just not as well as they'd hoped, did kind kind of plunged the series into somewhat of an identity crisis. There is a rumor, I'll call it as much as that since I can't really prove or disprove it with the information I could find, that while the game was developed by Ninja Theory, a different company that was allegedly delighted to take on the next entry in the series, they, again, allegedly, wanted to be less heavy-handed on the drastic changes, and it was actually Capcom that kept sending them back to the drawing board over and over until we got the finished product we have today. Again, I can't prove it. It could very well be BS and the other way around, but honestly, considering where Capcom's state of mind was at the time, it's not something I'd necessarily put past them. But like I said, it could have happened the other way around as well. I honestly don't really know for sure. I just thought I'd mention that. And I can't really pretend to be overtly mad as far as any events leading up to the game's release either, because I wasn't there. I pretty much only knew about the Devil May Cry series by name alone, in the sense that if you were to walk up to me and ask me during that time, oh, have you ever played Devil May Cry whatever, I'd be like, I think I've heard the name of that game before, but I've never played it. Apparently, though, the backlash that the game has gotten has actually cooled off with time, and people were way more upset with the game when it had first come out. And I hear a lot of that also had to do with just the way they advertised it, which again, I wasn't really present for, so I can't really comment on it, but I guess it is worth mentioning there's definitely some external influence that soured people's tastes in the game as well, not necessarily just what happened in the game itself. Okay, but back to bitching though. I want to talk about the game's coolness, for lack of a better term. A topic that, upon nearing the completion of this video, I didn't realize quite how many people also felt the same way about this factor specifically, but I do want to give my 2 cents on it regardless. This game really wants to be cool, that much is clear, but it tries to force it, if that makes any sense. It intentionally tries to be cool by doing things that it thinks that cool people like, in somewhat of a how do you do fellow kids fashion. Things that are truly cool are just what they are. They don't make looking all edgy and badass their top priority. In the case of a game, it should ideally try and make itself fun, granted the reboot at least did accomplish this, tell a compelling story, the reboot dropped the ball with this, and just leave a lasting positive impression. If successful, everything else, including presentation, usually naturally falls into place, as it's generally going to be a byproduct of the artist's own passion. I feel the reboot tries to artificially inflate this. It feels less so like this happened naturally and more so like whoever wrote the script kind of looked at a how to be cool book and took their notes from there. It kind of reminds me of guys who constantly call themselves alpha males and present themselves as these tough guys, but if they were truly what they said they were, they'd just shut up and let their actions speak for them. They wouldn't be needing to follow a guide in the first place. You know, it's like they kind of looked and they said, okay, well kids swear after every other syllable, so let's include that. Kids think talking ad nauseum about how much sex they're getting is cool, let's add a whole bunch of that. I can't believe I'm complaining about sexual themes in a video game considering I'm a self-admitted anime and JRPG fan, probably some gross hypocrisy on my part, but when the game tries that shit, it just feels off. Instead of feeling wacky, a bit humorous, or even sensual at times, it just feels juvenile, which is saying something considering how many anime and JRPGs feature high schoolers or at most very young adults. And then this game, which they're trying really hard to present to you as this big boy adult game, feels like the opposite. I wonder if this is how people who can't stand fan service in anime feel when they watch an anime and deep down they don't really like it for things like fan service, but because it's what's currently trendy and they don't want to be left out of the conversation with their peers, they kind of just begrudgingly push through it anyways. Is this how they feel? Because this game right here definitely gives me a bit of the ick. I can't believe I just used that word, but I can't really think of any other way to describe my feelings towards this. Anyway, this has gone on long enough and I even went off topic a second ago. But yeah, that will do it for this video, so you all know the drill. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, sub to the channel if you haven't already. A special thanks to all channel members for your continued support, it's much appreciated, and I will see you all again very soon.